Hope, promise, and enormous challenges. It's been 1 year since the fall of the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria. And even while the country celebrates, it's confronting the problems of a transitional state. So what kind of Syria is the new government building? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Deri Nabugeda. After nearly 14 years of war, Syria is trying to turn the page on its past. It's been a year since Ahmad al-Sharar's now defunct armed group walked into Damascus to little resistance. Bashar al-Assad, whose family held power since the 1970s, had already fled to Moscow. Crowds cheered the end of a dictatorship, and political prisoners walked out of the most notorious jails in the country, shocked at their own freedom. But the optimism of that day has 1 year later given way to the realities of transition, sectarian tensions, grinding poverty, and demands for justice over atrocities carried out by the government. So, can the new Syrian government bring real change and unity to Syria? And what can be learned from the steps they've taken so far? We'll put those questions to our guests in a moment. First, this report from Imogen Kimber.
After nearly 14 years of civil war, the end came quickly. The Syrian regime had been weakened, with backers Hezbollah and Iran diminished by war with Israel, and Russia preoccupied by war in Ukraine. Seeking an opportunity, rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham launched a surprise offensive in regime-held areas. Its forces swept into Aleppo, Homs, and finally Damascus. Bashar al-Assad fled, and more than 5 decades of authoritarian rule by the Assad family was over.
The city of Damascus has been liberated and the tyrant Bashar al-Assad has been toppled.
The leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Ahmad al-Sharaa, took the seat of power.
This victory is a turning point for the region.
Israel seized the opportunity to take control of strategic locations in Syria, while Sharaa created a transitional government and dissolved the security mechanisms of the old one. Sharaa has been widely recognised by international leaders, including the US and the UN. But sectarian violence is still present. More than 1,400 Alawites, a minority sect supported by Assad, who was Alawite himself, were killed in March. And there has been fighting between Bedouin, Druze and Syrian security forces in Suwaida. Hundreds of people were killed. In October, Syria held parliamentary elections, but only by those selected for electoral colleges by the government were able to vote. Sharaa says it will take a few years before full, free and fair elections can be organised, but they will happen.
Syria is currently experiencing its best conditions. No country is without internal problems, nor is there any authority in the world that enjoys 100% consensus.
Back in Syria, many people are hopeful for the future, but what that future will be remains to be seen. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's now bring in our guest. Joining us from Damascus is Haid, a researcher at Chatham House. From Doha is Ammar Kahf, who's the executive director at the Omran Center for Strategic Studies. And from Beirut is Heiko Women, who's a project director for Iraq, Syria and Lebanon at the International Crisis Group. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to you all. Haid in Damascus. Since you're there on the ground, tell us what the mood is like in the capital 1 year on, and what is your assessment as to where Syria stands today?
Well, thank you for having me. I think the mood, at least in Damascus, the people I've met are all celebrating the first year of basically free Syria from the Assad regime. People have been going to the streets on a daily basis for over 3 days now, but that does not change the fact that many of them are struggling financially. Services have improved, but the prices have increased, and their today basically challenges have also increased. So I think many are asking whether the next year will be better than the year before, or will it be harder?
So, Haid, how would you categorize the current state of the country compared to when you look back at expectations when the government of Bashar al-Assad collapsed?
Well, I think people have had really high hopes for basically the change. And although some of that hope, at least partially on the political level, people's ability to speak freely, organize, basically be active has improved, the living conditions have not improved as much, especially when it comes to those who are not able to make ends meet. So the government did partially well when it comes to increasing salaries, improving essential services, especially electricity, making essential services like fuel, bread available. But as I mentioned before, that came with a heavy price. Many people cannot afford to buy those commodities. And I think this is the real challenge right now, because for them, they thought that since the regime has been toppled, and then since the government has been saying that the country will recover quickly, that has increased their expectations. I think on the government side, them not being realistic about the real sort of difficulties they're facing and how long it will get for people to really start feeling the improvement on their day-to-day in their day-to-day life. That has been a shortcoming that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you so much. Ammar Kahf, you're speaking to us from Doha. Give me your assessment, 1 year on, where Syria stands today. Is it better or worse off?
I think it all depends where the baseline lies. If the baseline is December 8th, we're way better on many fronts in terms of political reconnecting Syria to the outside world, not just in shake hand visits, but actual connectivity to the political, economic infrastructures. We were way behind, maybe 100 years behind, and we are barely making it to the surface now in terms of reconnecting to all of the international agencies, the UN, etc., but also domestically to kind of stabilize the connectivity between provinces. We still have a challenge with the northeast and the Sueda areas, but nevertheless, reconnecting and integrating a lot of the provinces and even it's not just the province, but a lot of the governing structures to get them oiled back and to work, at least to work. Now comes the next challenge: is how do you make it more efficient? How do you fix the laws and procedures for the coming period? But at least taking inventory, understanding the terrain, the landscape domestically, both in terms of the political legitimacy, but also in terms of the economic policies that are still being fine-tuned and not yet finalized. And then you also have the security and the military. So basically you have two main issues: safety, public safety, security, infrastructure, as well as development. I think those two are very much interconnected with each other.
And when you look at the unity of the country, Ammar, or the lack of unity, where do you think things stand? I mean, the Assad government had claimed that it was Syria's unifying force. Now that it's gone, how united truly is the country, do you think?
Well, I mean, if you compare it to the Assad era, I think it's way more united in many instances and aspects. Economically, socially, we still have a long way to recover. And part of the recovery is that now we're able to talk to one another. We're able, Syrians from the outside, Syrians within, IDPs are able to talk to one another. And now we discover that we have a lot more challenges than we thought we had on December 8th. But nevertheless, we're able to move in most areas of Syria. You have a general unity. I mean, yes, we have an issue with Sueda that needs to be resolved through legal ways, perhaps, and accountability. But nevertheless, I see it way more united on the macro vision. If you go micro, there are a lot of challenges, obviously, but those are being worked out, and those things take time. And it takes much more than 1 year to get an inventory of the territory, of the terrain, of the socio-economic infrastructure, that has been fragmented for the last, at least the last 14 years, very much fragmented. And now we're having to at least know who's who on the map and how to reconnect.
Okay, I'll stand you by for a second because I'll head to Beirut. Heiko, women, thanks for your patience. So back in March of this year, the International Crisis Group wrote this, that Syria's new order is in a race against the clock. How's it done so far?
Well, they have raced quite well. Externally, definitely. I mean, there are the successes on the international level, the legitimization of the new order, internationally expressed, of course, mostly in the lifting of sanctions, has been a spectacular success. You can't call it anywhere else. Now, anyhow else. Now, the fruits of those successes, mostly in terms of investment, of course, improving the economic situation that Haidt has mentioned, that takes time because capital and investors are cautious, as they should be, I guess, and they want to see stability. They want to see that this is permanent. And some of the sanctions actually have not been entirely lifted. They have been suspended, so to speak, based on the behavior. Now, and investors will still need more, perhaps, to have the confidence. So externally, it was very well. Internally, I mean, you mentioned the sectarian trouble. You mentioned, Ammar talked about Sueda, and the Northeast was mentioned. And I think all of that comes down to one main challenge, which is that the people who are now in charge ruled Idlib for a couple of years. They did reasonably good local governance there. But there, it was absolutely crucial to be one bloc, one leadership, to deal with challenges, to neutralize rivals. Because every time there was a problem, internal problem, that problem went violent and it was exploited by the regime and sometimes others. So they basically programmed to monopolize power, to run things very tightly, with a very tightly cohesive circle, to take decisions just among a few people and then implement them.
Right.
And they're trying, and for the past year, they have been trying to run the country the same way, which perhaps for the first phase, for the first few months, that was the only way to do it. But now the challenge is get partners into the government to basically allow political life to resume, to allow social actors, political actors to become part of that process, and not just in terms of, a Christian here, a woman there. No, partnership in terms of actually having a real say in policies, in how this country will look like.
And Heiko, look, the new government, Heiko, let me just jump in there for a second, because the new government, obviously, as we all know, includes former leaders of the group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was designated as a terrorist organization. Do you think that has affected national reconciliation at all, and that social structure that you speak of?
Well, look, I mean, there are certainly people, a lot of people in Syria and outside Syria, who are worried that this group you mentioned, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and their leadership have perhaps not completely shed their past, which was a jihadi past at some point. That may or may not be justified. What matters is what they do on the ground. On the ground, I think that the trends are generally positive. But as I said, you need to revive political life. You need to have basically everybody in Syria needs to be convinced that in the country that's being built, they'll have a say how it's being built and a place, and that these new leaders, whatever their ideological orientation may or may not be now, that they do not impose that ideological orientation. I mean, I think that is the crucial question, not what they were 10 years ago.
Okay, let's, Hayat, back to you in Damascus. Obviously, security remains a major concern across Syria, particularly in areas in the south where Israel occupies now parts of Syria and continues to encroach on Syrian land. How do you think that the government has dealt with this so far?
Well, I think the government from the beginning has been trying to work on a diplomatic solution that will prevent escalation and reach an agreement that will be accepted by all parties. The problem is that the Israeli side has not been willing to accept any reasonable deal. So the government in Syria has been saying from the beginning, we don't pose any threat and we're willing to engage in addressing all the concerns you have when it comes to securing our side of the deconflicting lines. And they have basically entered few rounds of negotiations, but clearly there has been a few sticking points related to the rejection of the refusal of from the Israeli side to basically the refusal to withdraw from the areas that they have occupied after the fall of the regime. So without that being sort of agreed upon, I don't think there is any sort of deal to be made. At least that's what the official statement from the government side has been sort of communicating. It comes down to lack of willingness from the Israeli side and lack of pressure from the US side to make it work. So far, Damascus has done all it could in that respect, and then we'll come back to the Israelis and the Americans whether they can change what they have been doing so far in order to make it work or not. We'll have to see.
Ammar, do you agree with what Hayat has to say? And in your point of view, what is the biggest security threat that the country is facing today, and how capable is the government in addressing it?
I mean, for sure, today Israel is the biggest obstacle to stability in Syria, and it is the only one that's not acting rationally. The Syrian government from day one and even before has provided all the assurances through intermediaries, through direct talks, and have agreed to many of the demands that seem to be even unrealistic, but nevertheless has agreed to have direct talks and have provided the necessary assurances that Syria does not want to be involved in any negative relations with any of its neighbors, and it wants to move on. And that the focus is domestic, the focus is development and stability, and that it has complied with every aspect of it. But yet the Israelis continue to bomb. Over 1,000 bombs, over 400 operations, incursions into territories, about 20 kilometers of land inland that has been taken over, and the massacres that continue to attack weddings and social gatherings in the south of Syria. You really question what are they after? I mean, it seems like they continue to demand an instability in Syria, and they demand Syria to be fragmented. They demand Syria to not be stable and not be strong. And that's unrealistic. I mean, if you want a demilitarized zone, but then you want to hold Damascus accountable, well, how's that done? I mean, you want a zone that the government should not control militarily? Well, then who controls it? That creates a vacuum, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then they come in and say, oh, there's a vacuum, therefore we have to occupy it and safeguard the Israeli side. But I mean, the Syrian government has been trying to take a more diplomatic approach to partner with as many number of countries. You see the latest vote in the UN General Assembly, more votes than ever to support the right of Syria over the Golan Heights, and then also trying to use every aspect of diplomacy through several countries, but also through direct talks to put pressure, and especially the United States today, but many of the regional countries that have good relations with Israel as well, to put pressure on Israel to stop its incursion and to come back to the negotiations table.
Right. Heiko, in Beirut, let's just talk about the electoral process for just a moment, because earlier the Syrian leader, Ahmad al-Sharaa, was at the Doha Forum speaking, and he was questioned about when elections would be held, and he basically said that they would be held soon when the country is ready. What do you need to see in terms of elections going forward? And do you believe that it can truly be an inclusive electoral process? And when do elections need to happen, in your point of view?
Well, so first of all, we just had elections, that maybe not up to the standards that one would expect in other parts of the world, but it's a post-war situation. So at least we have a parliament. So first of all, one would like to see this parliament work and actually do what parliaments, I think, are supposed to do everywhere, which is to control what the government does and participate actively in the process of legislation. Now, going forward, I mentioned before, the challenge is to allow political life to resume. If we can even say there was political life before. There has eventually, there has to be a way for Syrians to express, to form political parties, I suppose, to create platforms where what people on the grassroots level, popular will, if you want, is aggregated into a real political force that can actually then compete in elections and present a program. So if you have elections where basically people can only run as individuals, as represent a certain neighborhood, then this is going to be it's going to be reduced to choosing people who provide services, going to be a way to organize clientelism, whatever the exact outcome. But it's not political life. And the government and the new leadership has, at least initially, insisted or kept saying that they want to include people as individuals, not as political groups, as political blocks. And I think that is let's say, a very diminished concept of politics or any electoral processes or governance for that. You need to allow for political visions to be formed, for the mechanisms that these political visions can go out and look for support and then compete. And otherwise, I don't think it really matters if everybody votes if there's no real political life.
Hi, looking ahead, if you were to just look at the next 12 months, what would you say are the biggest challenges that Syria is going to face, and what are you going to keep an eye out on?
Well, I think one of the main issues is what Heiko has been talking about, which is basically the political life. Will the government in Syria establish or issue a new law that will allow political parties to start soon to organize? Because if you postpone that, even if you are able to hold elections at a later stage 4 years from now, political parties will not have enough time or space to be able to compete fairly against Bashar or other parties. So this will be something to keep an eye on. Another one will be for example, the economic conditions and challenges that I've talked about before, because so far the government has been able to deliver on improving services, but the gap is massive between the people's income and basically their day-to-day living sort of expenses. So the cost of living will be a major challenge, and whether the government will be able to narrow that gap or not will be a massive factor in determining how stable the country will be. The security situation, we talked about Israel as one of the destabilizing powers and factors, but we have many other factors and issues internally related to the widespread of weapons inside Syria, having different factions, having factions that are part of the army, but they are not fully disciplined or fully sort of unified. You have the divisions and fractions within the government. We have in northeast Syria basically talks with Damascus on that issue, but the political sort of process has not advanced. So all of those issues will be major issues to keep an eye on, and they will determine whether next year will be stable or not.
Ammar, for you, what's the most important issue or issues in the next 12 months?
I mean, I think development policies are probably very much needed in the coming period. In the last 12 months, it's been experimentation, it's been reconnecting different pieces of the puzzle, identifying the pieces and then reconnecting them one at a time in terms of the business sector, the SMEs, the investments, the startups, the entrepreneurships, reconnecting them. I think they need now financing institutions, they need networks that will create this ecosystem both legally but also in terms of institution building. And that goes not just in the development sector, but institution building is probably the number two most important aspect in 2026. And I see a trend in almost every ministry and public institution to institutionalize, to create the internal procedures and policies, to complete also the capacity of people running those institutions. So it's a parallel system that needs to work both in terms of the vision, but also in terms of institutions and people. Building those capacities are probably the most needed now in the development sector. And that requires investments to create a snowball effect. That requires perhaps some loans, although the government does not want loans. So the country would not be attached to an agenda of the World Bank or otherwise.
Okay, Heiko, last word to you. What does Syria need the most, you think, over the next 12 months?
I think Syria, what Syria most needs over the next 12 months is that the leadership accepts that it needs partners.
So what do you think the biggest challenges, though, will be?
The biggest challenge is to deal with those potential partners. So you need the Northeast has been mentioned. There's the question about integration of the armed forces in the Northeast has been long on the agenda, has not advanced. And again, it comes down to not only the question like how are these people integrated, but will those institutions that exist in the Northeast integrated in a way that allows for the people in the Northeast to have a say in how Syria looks. The same thing about Sweda, is Sweda going to stay part of Syria on a level where people in Sweda feel that the people that the government in Damascus is there for them, protects them like protects anybody else? This is really the main challenge. Damascus needs to understand that it cannot run this place alone as a small group from a sort of cohesive political and ideological place or background, and that there are other parts, other social groups in Syria that need to feel represented, seen, and have a say.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much to my guests for joining us. Hayed in Damascus, Ammar Kahf in Doha, and Heiko Women, you're joining us from Beirut. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Join the conversation on X. Our handle is AJ Inside Story from myself and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching and bye-bye for now.